Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ, presented by Jersey Mike's. With a combined age of 51 years and 337 days, Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts are the youngest pair to ever face off in the Super Bowl. And they surpassed the previous youngest duo of Joe Montana and Dan Marino back in 1984. Ooh, what a matchup that was in hindsight. Mahomes already among the greats, but Hurts would love to have this matchup reflected on with the same reverence as Montana Marino, certainly years from now. Let's get into some Super Bowl topics with former quarterback Brady, Quinn, senior NFL writer Pete Prisco. Kansas City quarterback Patrick Mahomes already has what many consider to be a Hall of Fame resume. He can add another trophy to that in Glendale, maybe even two if he ends up winning the Super Bowl MVP. So, Brady, just looking at the Lombardi, what would another Lombardi mean for the resume of Patrick Mahomes?
I think it just continues to establish that he is one of the greatest quarterbacks to have played this game. His career's not over. But I think what he's done early on has put him on a path to being up there amongst the greats, like a Tom Brady, like we've talked about a lot today, or the Peyton Mannings of the world. And I think getting a second Lombardi as well helps differentiate him from some of those other guys, right, that have just won one. It's one of the reasons why I think Aaron Rodgers is probably hungry to try to get another Super Bowl as well to cement his legacy in the league. But for Patrick Mahomes, it's no surprise. He's been absolutely phenomenal since his first year starting in the league. And said, look, I know you feel more favorable. We still got a lot of time before this game's played, but the reason why I think you'd pick the Chiefs is purely because of Patrick Mahomes.
Absolutely.
No other reason.
Absolutely. And what we've seen with Patrick Mahomes is an evolution of Patrick Mahomes. And it's not just because of the injury this year. He's improved in terms of being much more patient in the pocket, going through his reads, going through his progressions, checking it down. Against the Bengals, he had to be that way. And, you go back to that touchdown to Valdez-Scantling. He opened to the left, Kelsey was doubled, came back to the middle, the safety was there, and then came back, took a shot in the mouth, and threw a perfect pass. Now, Patrick Mahomes would have got rid of that ball a little earlier if he was healthy because Valdez-Scantling was open right from the get-go. But he made the reads and the progressions, and I think that's where he's grown as a quarterback. We still haven't seen the best of Patrick Mahomes yet. I'm a big believer in that, in terms of playing the position. He's got by with athletic ability. There were a couple times in that game against the Bengals where you saw him try and step up, and usually he steps through that stuff. He couldn't step through it. Right. And so I think he evolved in that game, but he's evolved throughout the entire season.
And he's evolved this season because they haven't had Tyreek Hill. When you have a guy who's special like Tyreek Hill is, and he can separate, you're going to hang on to him a little bit longer. You're going to try to extend the play to allow him to get open downfield because you know he can create that big splash play. And I'm not saying they don't have speed, but they don't have anyone like Tyreek Hill right now that's playing on the roster. It's forced him to have to play from the pocket, go through his progressions and reads like a Joe Burrow, some of the other quarterbacks have had to play the game.
Plus, eventually, and all these runaround guys, and everybody loves it, it always starts squeezing, and it always comes right back to that pocket.
Yeah. Well, you get tired of getting hit. I mean, that's the bottom line. Is you see as the guys get older, they're throwing and they're spinning, trying to protect themselves because they don't want to get hit.
You don't get old. You don't get faster as you get older. I can promise you that.
At your advanced age.
I can promise you that.
At his advanced age, not old, advanced age.
The Eagles are the favorites right now for this game, and while their strength of schedule has been criticized, the 32nd in the league when you look at it, going into that Niners game, we talked about that, but their defense has shown that they are no slouch, allowing just 14 points in the two playoff games. Pete, what kind of problems can this defense provide for this Kansas City front?
Well, if they get behind, if the Chiefs get behind, they can provide a big problem because they can rush the passer. I mean, when you talk about a team that had 70 sacks, they went from 29 to 70 sacks in a year. And that's not just by adding Hassan Reddick. I mean, they've improved. Josh Sweat might be the most underrated player on the entire field in the Super Bowl. That's how good he is at the other side. So I think that's the problem. You can get after the quarterback if you get behind. And look, we know their run defense has been an issue all year long. They've improved at it, but it's been a problem all year long. So I think as they've gotten better, the defense has gotten better because they've been able to turn those pass rushers loose.
One thing I look at, too, is the Eagles' ability to run the football. That offensive line is playing as good as anyone. They're being road graders up front. And I think if you're looking at this game and probably how Nick Sirianni sees it, not that you're trying to play keep away, but you'd love to limit the amount of times you have to see Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce in the Andy Reid offense. So there's also the other side of the football helping out the Eagles' defense. Run the football, dominate the line of scrimmage like they have, and not play keep away, but again, turn up some of that clock. And I think they can be really successful doing it. As good as they've been with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, some of their big play receivers, There's still a physical group up front. I think that's the other side of the ball you got to keep an eye on that could dictate the way this game's played.
It's two of the best offensive lines in the league, I think, across the board.
I would say Philly, though, in my opinion.
Philly's the best. Philly's the best offensive line in the league.
And I think there's a gap before you get to Kansas City.
Yeah.
Then you start looking at each side of the defensive fronts, which
Yeah.
we'll get to. And I think it's Philly. And there's a gap before you start talking about the Chiefs. Now, Chris Jones is a phenomenal player.
He's the best.
Best interior D tackle in the league. He can't do it all himself. Yeah. Even as much as Steve Spagnuolo moves him around.
Frank Clark shows up in the playoffs, though. He's got a ton of sacks.
But it's in part because of Chris Jones, the way they move him around to get all that attention.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.